as the Trump Justice Department continues to fire some of the nation's most experienced counter-terrorist experts and prosecutors. Today, one of those experienced prosecutors left behind a stark warning on his way out. Mike Ben-Ari, in a striking letter that he taped to his office door, Martin Luther style, writes, quote, "The Justice Department leadership is more concerned with punishing the president's perceived enemies than they are with protecting our national security," unquote. Ben-Ari continues, accusing political leadership of, quote, "jeopardizing our national security and making Americans less safe."
All right. I assume he's here to learn some of these Bad Bunny lyrics, and I can translate them in Spanish for when his Eagles make it to the Super Bowl this coming year. It can't be because he has a brand new book out there. It's called The Race Against Terror, Chasing an Al-Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War. It's my buddy, Jake Tapper. You can catch him on CNN weeknights between 5 to 7 p.m. Jake, good to see you, my friend.
It's good to see you. I have to confess, I have not yet been bit by the Bad Bunny phenomenon. I know I'm late to the game. And I know that everybody adores him and he's huge and all the rest. I am excited to learn more. I am excited to become part of it. Yeah. But I'm just an old man. Yeah. And, I'm late to everything.
Well, here's one thing that you are overconfident about, Jake. It's your writing style here in this fantastic book here, Race Against Terror. I want to get into this because one of the things I was laughing as I was reading this book last night is my wife makes fun of me because she reads every night before she goes to bed. I don't read unless somebody sends me a book to read, but I'm reading this book and she's like, look at you. And I was like, you know why I love reading Jake's books? Because they're like 7 to 8 page chapters and it makes me feel like I accomplished something as soon as I'm done with a chapter. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about this book, what made you want to write it, and the full story about this Spin Ghoul. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, right?
Yes.
Spin Ghoul and this terrorist that was captured in Italy and this race against terror that these two agents were up against.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you like the chapter lengths because this was something like this is my 8th book, and I've thought a lot over the years about how to make the books better, how to make them more for the reader, how to make them more compelling, how to make them when you read a short chapter, you feel like you've achieved something, and if there's like the 70-page chapter, it's dissuading. It makes you not want to keep reading because it's like, oh my God, I got 70 more pages to read. So that's all part of this book. It's like me wanting to meet the reader where they are and knowing that I'm competing not just with other books, but with their phones and with social media and with Netflix and all that. And I'm just trying to this is a true story, but I tried to write it as much like a thriller as I could so that it would be compelling and not homework, even though it's nonfiction. Too often nonfiction to me reads like homework. And I don't want that anymore. I don't want to do that. The book is based on is a true story that I just happened on, where I was at my son's paintball birthday party in 2022, and it's all the way out in the boonies in Virginia. So I just have the adults just come and stay and have pizza and drinks and mingle while the kids are killing themselves in the forest. And one of the dads came up to me and said, "Oh, I know so-and-so from your last book, The Outpost," which is a true story about Afghanistan. And I said, that book was so difficult to write because the military keeps such horrible records and they do not share them. And he said, tell me about it. Then he proceeds to tell me the story that is Race Against Terror. He is an assistant U.S. attorney, young guy in his 30s, at the desk in Brooklyn. He gets a call from the FBI. I just got the craziest call. The Italians have picked up, it's 2011, Arab Spring. The Italians have picked up on one of these giant boats containing refugees from the Arab Spring, a guy who claims he's Al-Qaeda. He says his name is Spin Ghoul. Have you ever heard of him? Bitcower's like, yeah, we've heard of him. They've heard of him because other detainees at Gitmo have talked about Spin Ghoul. And so the Americans go over and they hear Spin Ghoul's confession. Why he confessed, we can get into separately, but he does this whole confession. So then the Italians are like, great, take him. We don't want him. He didn't do anything to us. He says he's killed Americans in Afghanistan. He wanted to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria. You do what you want with him. But the Americans can't just take him because all they have is his confession, and any first-year law student could get that thrown out of court. He's just a crazy man. There's no evidence. You don't even know what date this ambush was on these American troops. So the Americans have a ticking clock. They have to prove a case against Spingool before the Italians just get fed up and throw him in a refugee camp and he walks out and achieves his life's goal, which, as stated, is to kill as many Americans as possible, and not American soldiers necessarily, just a packed Starbucks in Barcelona, a packed Starbucks in downtown Manhattan, if you can get there. So that's the race. And what was so interesting to me, as Bitkauer told me this story, is almost exactly 3 years ago, by the way, was the sleuthing. I don't know about you, but I love police procedurals. I love CSI and Law and Order and Cold Case. I love them all. And I love just the tracking down of evidence. And this guy told me this incredible story of how they tracked down the evidence. People following the story knew that he was tried in 2017, but nobody knew how incredibly difficult it was to get that evidence to get a conviction. And that was what was so interesting to me. And I love the fact that you like the short chapters.
I love the short chapters. You know, Ellie Honig and I both went to Rutgers together at different times, a couple years apart. And the joke I always make when Ellie and I ever do a CNN segment is Ellie continued his criminal justice major. I did not with my minor, but I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a prosecutor. I love the minutia stuff. I hate when the police shows get the investigation part of it wrong. Like that drives me nuts. So I'm with you on that board. But I did want to ask you.
What also I learned is that, like, I didn't even know this, but like assistant U.S. attorneys are also the ones being detectives. It's not just the cops. It's everybody's pitching in. Everybody's trying to find evidence. Sorry to interrupt.
No. So, but let me ask you, because that's interesting that Bitkauer, the actual one of the main characters in the book, is the person who told you this. But I'm curious because there's a lot of historical, you just mentioned before, records are not the best kept. And you mention a lot in this book, specific battles, different instances of military troops and what they said to each other in the foxholes and stuff like that. How did you go about doing that research? Take us through how you put this book together. How it was comparable?
Sure. So the battle in the book is an ambush on April 25th, 2003. And that's where Spingool and his team of Al-Qaeda fighters shot at and ambushed and killed 2 American service members and seriously wounded 4 others. Destroying lives in their wake. And I knew that one of the things I had to do, and this is also one of the reasons why I wrote the book, was bring this life to battle. It couldn't just be like mentioned, like, yes, and they did this. I needed to tell the story of the battle. I needed to tell the story of these men. I needed people to understand that this wasn't just something in history books. This really happened to real people in a contemporary way. And what I did was I did what the prosecutors did, which is I interviewed as many of these soldiers as possible. And it was very difficult for the prosecutors and the FBI agents to do, and it was very difficult for me to do too. I'm nothing compared to the difficulty of what they went through, but it's not fun to go up to people and ask them about the worst day of their life. Tell me about the worst day of your life. Tell me about the day that you almost got your face blown off, or you saw your best friend get his face blown off, or whatever. And it's also, I just have to say, journalistically and as a writer, battles are so difficult to write. Again, I'm not comparing them to actually being in a battle, but they're very difficult to write. There's this famous movie, Rashomon, a Japanese Kurosawa film in which an incident happened and 5 people see it, and every one of the people tells a different story, and they're all completely different, and everybody is the hero in their own story, etc. And it's a film about the subjective nature of how we view truth, and that is what it's like to write about a battle. There are dozens of people, and they're all seeing it from different experiences, and so you are just trying to, and it's obviously incredibly hectic and insane and traumatic. But I wanted to get the story as close to accurate as possible. And thankfully, because I'd written The Outpost, which was well received by troops and service members, and was turned into a good and realistic film by the director Rod Lurie, people in the community, the veterans community, had heard of me, or if they hadn't, they were able to Google and see that I'd written this book, and people knew that I cared about the details of it, and I was there to bring honor and bring life to what they went through, and to those who aren't there anymore, around anymore, to who they were. So that was part of it too.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, some of the battle stuff and then the soldiers getting transported back to the hospital, you describe it very well. And one of the things I want to ask you was a follow-up on that because there's a broader context here with respect to a lot of the stuff that you do for veterans, but also there's Pew Center research that shows that veterans, 1 in 4 veterans who were deployed say it's negatively impacted their physical or mental health. And about half of post 9/11 combat veterans say their deployment had a negative impact on their mental health. And in one of the instances in the book, you talk about these FBI agents that are going to visit Camacho to try to get him. I forget the terminology that they need him to be like this corroborating witness.
Yeah,
And so he's very standoffish. And he says in the book, you write this in the book, and I don't know if you got this from him, but he says,
I did. I did.
I don't know what you guys want from me. Like I've seen some stuff.
Right.
So what does Jake Tapper think of currently the way we treat our veterans that come back home? You do so much work in this space. You mentioned about the relationship you have with so many veterans. This book has a little bit of that in there, but what do you make of the way we treat our troops when they come back home here in the U.S.?
This country is a great country, and I love the United States. But we have a very long and ugly history of how we treat our veterans, and it literally dates back to the Revolutionary War. You can find examples of people being made promises for serving in a specific state battalion for a pension and then not getting it. And having to petition to President Washington to get the pension they were deserved. It dates all the way back. And I think it's better now, but I still think it's shameful how we treat our veterans. I mean, I don't know what trauma you've ever been through in your life. We've all been through something, but I will say just being in a war zone for a week or two, not fighting, not being targeted, not devoting my life to it for 5 years, 10 years, just being in a war zone for a week is traumatic and it affects you mentally. And look, some journalists do it all the time and they have post-traumatic stress. And some journalists just hop in and hop out, like me, and like we're okay. But like I remember when I got back from Israel in I think November 2023, and also when I got back from Ukraine in I think April 2022. And again, I'm not asking for sympathy for me. I'm just saying this little smidgen of something was very upsetting and like upset me in ways that like I couldn't even get a hold of for like a few weeks or months, in terms of sleep, in terms of anxiety, in terms of and again, I'm saying that's nothing. That is nothing compared to what these guys go through and gals. So I don't think that we do enough for them. I think that we're starting to do more, and that's great as a country. But like for instance, every year I do a thing called Homes for Our Troops. We do an auction where I get famous people to contribute, a Zoom call or some swag or something, and we auction it off on eBay. And, maybe we raise a few $100,000. And Homes for Our Troops is a charity. It's a top-rated charity. Most of the money goes to building these houses, and they're specially designed homes, mortgage-free homes for severely wounded veterans. And theoretically, the government should do this anyway. Like, if you lose a leg because you ran into battle at the behest of the United States, at the behest of you and me and who we voted for or whatever, and they sent them into battle, this and that, and you now can't get around your crappy apartment, the United States the country, on a theoretical basis, we should build a home for you. And I've seen the effect that these homes have had on people, where all of a sudden they feel like, okay, I can, first of all, they don't have to pay for the house, so they don't have to worry about that. And they can go get another degree, or they feel like a man again, or they feel like the head of their household again, or they feel like they don't have to ask for their wife's help to take a shower or to help with the dishes. It's incredibly emboldening. It changes their lives. And the fact that like, I'm honored to do work for Homes for Our Troops, and I'm so grateful that people chip in, and I'm so grateful that people contribute and this and that. But like, the taxpayers should pay for that.
Right.
I mean, in my view,
Yeah, and you fed into the follow-up perfectly, Jake, because there's a scene in the book when they're talking about this insurgent attack, I guess it was, that happened with Gerard and some of the other troops. And I guess the U.S. I don't want to describe it too militarily, but the U.S. does these flyovers and they bomb this town, and the guys, I guess, wait till the next day to see and assess the damage. They go back there and they see that 11 civilians have been killed, and people are crying, and the troops can do nothing but just stand there. And then
Yeah.
you wrote like this little line that kind of just brushes to the next page. And it's about these government officials come over with money and they
Yep.
give money. And I thought to myself as I'm reading this is the microcosm of the United States when it gets involved militarily into conflicts.
Yep.
They blow up things and then they hand the paper towels to the people that are bleeding and they say, hey, why don't you wipe yourself off? As you were writing this, but also as you're a journalist covering these type of same scenarios. And I've asked this of members of Congress who have served in war and now have voted for pieces of legislation to give more weapons to other countries. When you see that dichotomy, how does Jake Tapper digest that? How should the American people digest that dichotomy of like, we blow things up and then we also provide the paper towels so you can wipe yourself off from bleeding?
Yeah, that's a pretty stark way of putting it. So yeah, this happens a few weeks before all. It also happens in April 2003. So the Americans have been put at this base, Firebase Shkin, which is right near the Pakistan border, and that's where all the Al Qaeda terrorists are coming from, Pakistan. The insurgents that are homegrown in Afghanistan, that's one thing, but I mean that's the Taliban, but the Al Qaeda are coming from Pakistan. And there's one day when the Americans are chasing some bad guys, and they blow up the wrong building in this village, and they kill like a 10 to a dozen innocent civilians. What they blow up is it's basically like a little bed and breakfast or a little motel, a little hotel for travelers, because this is a Pakistan-Afghanistan border, and people travel, they walk, they hitch rides. I mean, it's not there isn't a Greyhound service, there isn't an airplane service for peasants, as if for want of a better term, and they kill a bunch of innocent people. And I'm not saying that there is a direct relationship at all between this horrible accident and the ambush that happens a few weeks later, and there's no apparent connection whatsoever. But it just was a picture, a slice of first of all, the day-to-day experience that the Americans had there, because as you know, the troops then have to go there and see what we did, what we the American people did, the American military did in this accident. And it's part of war, and it's horrible. And it's one of the things that the troops, I didn't go looking for that anecdote. When I was talking to the various troops from Camacho to Dwayne McKnight to, all as many as I could reach, they would tell me the story. And then I Googled it, and, it was written about. The military, the U.S. military acknowledged that we did it. But yeah, then the guys from the civil service come with briefcases full of cash to give it to the Afghans who lost their wives or daughters or sons or whatever. And it's just horrible. And it just makes me think about the speed with which we send troops, especially inexperienced troops, to battle, the horrible accidents that can happen as a result, the unintended consequences that almost always result whenever we get involved militarily, whether it's sending weapons or sending our troops with weapons. During the Abbey Gate Afghanistan withdrawal, some people forget that, after the horrific thing that happened at Abbey Gate when 13 service members were killed and like 160 Afghans from that ISIS-K terrorist attack, there was another moment where the Americans bombed a vehicle full of an Afghan family because they'd been given bad intelligence, and they killed an innocent family. And it's just always, I remember debating on my show or raising on my show the idea of Trump has taken the war on terror powers, and he is now trying to apply them to narco terrorists with the argument that they have basically declared war on us because they're selling drugs to the United States, and there are tens of thousands of Americans who die every year from these drugs. And he's just without declaring war or seeking congressional approval or anything. He's just trying to say, and this is the exact same as when we went after terrorists in Afghanistan or Yemen or whatever, and so we're just going to blow them up too. And I just raised in my show, well, how do we know that these people are who they say they are? I mean, like, I have no sympathy for people in drug cartels, but are we sure that every boat we blow out of the water is actually
Right.
narco terrorists?
Right.
And
Right.
somebody said on my show, like, well, I think military intelligence pretty good and da 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 da. And I said, and it was kind of ignored, but like, that's what people said right before the Biden administration blew a
Right.
truck full of innocent Afghans out of the world. And it's just like, people make mistakes. That's, and when we send people into battle or send planes with missiles into the sky, inevitably there's going to be a mistake.
This episode of Can We Please Talk is presented by our friends over at Fresh Roasted Coffee. Delicious tasting coffee since 2009. They've been our proud sponsor. You see the promo code there. Look at this. They sent me this beautiful kit right here. Listen to that. Listen to that seal coming out, right? What's in it? Environmentally safe, compostable K-Pods. I love the dark Mexican blend. You can go to their website right now, take the quiz. That quiz is going to put you with a flavor profile. Listen to that sound of the coffee that you're going to be matched up with. Go to freshroastedcoffee.com. Click the link right now in our show notes. You can see it right there. Click that link. It's going to take you to the site. When you get to checkout, use our promo code, Can We Please Get 20? All one word, Can We Please Get 20, 20. You're going to get 20% off your first purchase. Head to freshroastedcoffee.com, our official sponsor of the Can We Please Talk podcast. There's a lot of butterfly effect in your book, Jake, throughout reading this entirety of it. And you just fed into the follow-up, again, perfectly. You're knocking these out of the park, Tapper. I got to tell you, you're getting the 7-10 roll.
And here. I don't even play ball.
No, you don't even, because the question I was going to ask you, because you mentioned his name, Lord Voldemort, I'm sorry, President Trump. And you said there about the administration and the policy change. And in your book, you write a little bit about Obama's policy change different from Bush. But I'm curious right now, because the war on terror, for lack of a better terminology, it's kind of died down and fizzled. We're seeing the rise of domestic terrorism for all intent and purpose. But the problem is that, Jake, I don't know if you know this, I was a weekend PA on Fox and Friends. If I had stayed there for 20 years, who knew I could have run the military? And now we have a weekend anchor on Fox and Friends. Co-anchor. That's right, Jake. That's right, because there's three of them. And a weekend co-anchor running the military who gave one of the weirdest speeches I think I've ever seen. And I had a bunch of military personnel texting me, including Pentagon reporters, some that have drawn the ire of Pete Hegseth, that were texting me. They were like, this is ridiculous. And we also have an FBI director who, let's be honest, was on every podcast available in 2023 and 24.
Every right-wing podcast. Sean Ryan, the like. I hate that I know all of them, Jake. He's out there spouting conspiracy theories. And now we have both of those folks in charge of the largest military and obviously the largest law enforcement agency in the U.S. What do you make of, if this scenario had happened during this current administration, the trust of the American people to kind of execute something like this? And then what do you make of the administration overall when it comes to foreign policy issues and protecting us from terrorism, both domestic and foreign? So, excellent question. Very interesting. So I'm of two minds of this. One, the guy I write about in the book, Spin Ghoul, is the very first foreign terrorist tried in a U.S. criminal court for killing service members in a battle zone. It had never happened before. It started under Obama, but the trial came during Trump's first term in 2017, and the verdict in 2018. So there was some continuity. And earlier this year, President Trump announced that the U.S. was going to be bringing a different foreign terrorist from abroad to the United States for criminal prosecution for killing Americans in a battle zone, and that's the Abbey Gate bombing. It's this guy Jafar, who is a Pakistani terrorist with ISIS Khorasan. So, knowingly or not, Trump is following in Obama's footsteps, because it turns out that criminal courts are very effective places to lock up terrorists for the rest of their lives. So there is that sense of continuity. To Trump's credit and to the credit of just because when Obama tried to do it with Spin Ghoul, and this is a big part of the book, there was this hue and outcry. The idea that the U.S. was going to bring foreign terrorists into the United States to be prosecuted. Democrats, Republicans, people on Capitol Hill, people in Manhattan, everybody was acting as if this was the worst idea ever. That like it was basically bringing supervillains into Manhattan, like that, like that these terrorists had like they were like Thanos, and they were just going to like shoot, you know, lasers out of their fingers and kill us all. And when Trump announced it earlier this year, there was nobody said boo. Everybody was fine with it. Great, lock them up, etc. So that's, I think, an advance and a good thing, and the fact that we're learning and we're achieving some sort of consensus. Now, here's the but. There's a guy in my book named George Toscas. George Toscas was this hard ass at the National Security Division of the Justice Department. He'd worked at the Justice Department since 1993. He had been through some of the worst and toughest prosecutions of terrorists and there's this one case where these Hutu warriors chopped up and killed a bunch of Westerners, including two Americans. And then they were interrogated by people from a rival clan, the Tutsi clan in Rwanda, and then they were turned over to the United States. And ultimately, I only tell you this because their confession was thrown out of court because they were tortured by the Rwandans, and they walked, and they're free men, these three murderers. They're in Australia now. And that weighed on George Toscas. And so, like, he was never going to let that happen again. And he was one of the best weapons that we had in the war on terror. One of the toughest prosecutors. He demanded that any trial, any prosecution be, all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed before like getting the approval of the Attorney General was nothing after you got it through George Toscas. George Toscas was basically fired by the Trump administration. He was sidelined and like he's just, his last day is coming up. I've never talked to him, by the way. He did not cooperate with me. He would not return my emails or my calls. I've never met him. Nothing. But I know from his colleagues that he's excellent and like a huge resource for the United States, no matter who's in the White House. But because he signed off on the Mar-a-Lago search warrant when Trump had those classified documents there and wouldn't turn them back over, he's now sidelined. And this is where I'm concerned because we are letting experienced prosecutors and people who know what they're doing, we are pushing them out. I mean, Trump and his team are pushing them out. The U.S. attorney at the Eastern District of Virginia, where Jafar is going to be tried, he was fired a couple weeks ago because he wouldn't bring criminal complaint against James Comey. This week, because some nutjob tweeted something about him, the lead assistant U.S. attorney on the Jafar case was fired. I'll be covering that on my show, but it is a huge problem. Experienced prosecutors whose jobs are and whose excellence is in keeping us safe, locking up bad guys forever, are being discarded because they are not MAGA or not MAGA enough or not loyalist enough, or some lunatic just claims something on social media and they believe it. Like, whatever the reason, it's madness. So that's where I come down in this place that, like, policy-wise, there's good stuff, and personnel, it's insanity.
Speaking of lunatics on Twitter, Jake, your last book tour had some lunatics on Twitter getting mad at you. You went on
a lot of them still mad.
A lot of them very, very mad. Everyone loves to say, "Where's Jake Tapper?" when President Trump makes a gaffe. It's one of the funniest.
I usually cover it on my
show.
show.
I know you do. But I'm curious for you because you went across all of these shows. You did this last book tour. We had Alex on the show, by the way, to talk about the book. And obviously your interview with Megyn Kelly was one that was really making a lot of the rounds. But as Jake sits back at home, watching the way that book tour unfolded and all the reporting that you and Alex did for that book, do you sit back, do you take a step and you go, you know what, I maybe we should have done this, or maybe I would have taken that out? Is there anything that you feel that you either left out, you shouldn't have put in, you should have taken out, you should have said about that book and about covering President Biden's cognitive decline and the people that tried to cover it up?
Not really. I stand by, Alex and I stand by all the reporting. And by the way, Vice President Kamala Harris's book reaffirmed like all of our reporting. And you know, the Twitter noise notwithstanding, we were on the bestseller list for 7 weeks. We were number one for two, and it got great reviews from, credible mainstream news outlets. The whole "Where's Jake Tapper" thing is, uh, I mean, it's really played as far as I'm concerned. But I mean, if people want to keep saying it, it's fine. I don't care. But um, it is it represents a certain denial of the reality. Alex and I wrote this book because Biden had such a disastrous debate, the Democratic Party and voters rallied on around him to drop out, which had never happened before in history. And then Kamala Harris had 107 days to convince the country that she was a change agent, and she didn't achieve that. And now Donald Trump is president, and everything we're going through right now are because of those decisions. It has nothing to do with me, and it has nothing to do with Alex. We wrote a book. We started writing it after Election Day to figure out just what the hell happened and why it happened and who knew what when. And that book came out in May. There's almost, and so I don't really understand the focus on me and Alex, or me, because Alex escapes a lot of it, because I didn't write this book 3 years ago and chase Joe Biden out of the race. Like we did a book that was a reaction to a historical event that had never happened before. So I found it odd. I find it odd, and I do think that the Democratic Party is in a bad place with voters, not because of my book. The Democratic Party is in a bad place with voters for a number of reasons, but one of them is because the Democratic Party lied to its voters, lied to the American people about Biden's ability to run for re-election. I mean, Kamala Harris says in her book that it was reckless for him to run for re-election without more of a conversation about it. And she says that he was not capable of running a vigorous campaign in 2024. I mean, that's Kamala Harris saying it. I find it odd that she's getting so, I don't want her to get blowback or whatever for speaking her truth, but like that seems more important than what I think.
Right.
So that's one. And I don't think the Democratic Party and those people who do the "Where's Jake Tapper," like, okay, I mean, that's again, it's part of this misinformation silo or preaching to the choir silo. Like, okay, blue sky, that's fine. Okay, Twitter, threads, whatever. That's not what the American people think. Nobody out there thinks Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson chased Joe Biden out of the race. That's because that's not what happened. We wrote a book to try to explain what the hell just happened,
Right.
and one I stand by. And as you know, we cover Trump. I cover Trump 2 hours every day, very aggressively, and that's not going to change. So I just find it kind of a cop out
Yeah.
for like problems that were not by me.
Well, and we asked Alex about the shield that you provide him because you're the more known figure.
I'm happy to be Batman to his Robin.
Yeah, exactly. But Jake, it funnels in again. You're funneling into these follow-ups perfectly, Jake. A few weeks ago, Charlie Kirk was killed on a campus in Utah Valley, right? I texted my dad and I said, "Dad, do you ever worry about your son? Because, I'm out there. I go on your show, Jake. I got this show and I love arguing on Twitter. I'm Puerto Rican. It's my favorite thing to do, Jake." And my dad said, "You don't do the same thing. Like you do a news program, right? Like you do a segment, you give data. And then when you come back, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett is on and stuff like that. You don't do what Charlie does. Charlie was just opinion, making things up." But it funnels into something you just said about misinformation and the way media is evolving. And I'm curious the human angle for you, because a lot of people do think they wrongfully that Jake Tapper does spread misinformation and he's a public figure. Do you ever worry seeing what happened with Charlie Kirk, knowing like you and I know that we do different things than what Charlie does? Charlie has to feed the machine, right? Like there's two Charlies. There was fundraising Charlie for the conservative movement. And then there was podcaster Charlie. I've got to feed the machine because there's 70 others behind me that are going to take my spot if I don't do it. Mm-hmm. Do you worry about being a public figure at all? Did anything on that day when you came home that night with your wife and stuff like that, was there any type of conversations of like, I do worry a little bit?
Well, I worry, but not just because of the horrific thing that happened to Charlie Kirk, which, by the way, is also part of the problems that we have with free speech in this country, because this twisted person who killed him thought that the solution to Charlie Kirk's speech, I mean, Charlie Kirk was not a politician. Charlie Kirk did not hold office. Charlie Kirk does not pass laws. Charlie Kirk was a 31-year-old who had a voice, but and was, he was an important voice in the MAGA movement, but he wasn't actually inflicting any pain on people. I mean, his words were all he had. So it was part of the anti-free speech problem we have in this country, whether, different, but not unlike anything else having to do with silencing speech. It's just this twisted person thought killing him was the way to silence his speech. But in terms of security issues, yeah, I mean, not just related to Charlie Kirk, but related to anything having to do with prominence and the fact that in this era of demonization, people get unfairly demonized, and I happen to be one who gets it from both sides. But there are a lot of people who get it. I think women and minorities get it worse than white men, just as a general rule, because in addition to their role doing whatever they do, you throw in misogyny or racism. So I think about it, all the time. And when I need to have security, I have security. But at the same time, you can't let it rule your life, And I think your dad is sweet but naive that people aren't distinguishing among, well, this person does this and this person does that. As you know, there are people who erroneously think that I am providing misinformation when I do my news show, whether they think that from the left or from the right. And for too many people, the solution to that is, well, it's not a problem because I'm not providing misinformation, but the solution to their perceived problem is demonizing me, and in some cases, I guess, threatening me. We shouldn't expect, in this era of demonization, we shouldn't expect anything other than violence, because there are always twisted people who hear, oh, so and so is a bad person, therefore I'm going to do X. They're looking for an outlet for their dark thoughts.
Very well said, Jake. And before I let you go, one thing I love asking authors on the show here. All right, you're going to be doing this book tour where you're going to be stopping at a bunch of bookstores. Mm-hmm. But let's just say you weren't on this book tour and you happen to wander into a bookstore. You see somebody pick up a copy of this book. You tap them on the shoulder. Hey, I wrote that book. Oh, yeah? What's it about, Jake Tapper? Tell them what it's about, Jake.
It's about sleuthing. It's about detective work to lock up an incredibly dangerous man. And it's a true story, but the author tried to write it like a thriller. So it's a real page turner.
It is a real page turner, short chapters for people like me who love reading short chapters and hitting those small goals. Race Against Terror, chasing an Al-Qaeda killer at the dawn of the forever war. You can catch his show weeknights between 5 to 7 on CNN. He's one of my favorite people out there in media. Jake, you know how much I adore you and I love you, buddy. And thank you for everything you do. Please continue success and stay safe. Jake Tapper.
For you as well. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. Mike Leon from the Can We Please Talk podcast. Thank you so much for watching this clip. Do me a favor. Hit subscribe. You're going to get more content from us over at Can We Please Talk.